Stronger.
Son of a bitch.
Faster. Oh, yeah!
If you're feeling stiff in the morning, the first thing you do is not try to judge yourself. Like, I can't squat. I might feel really stiff. That's okay. Let me start moving. And part of that movement is thinking, can I roll my ankles, do some ankle circles? Can I flex and extend my toes? Because what you see is when I pull at the very, very end of that fascial line, which that's where most of the lines for the body start at the feet. So if I start to pull and get some movement at the very bottom of this, that pulls and creates tension everywhere up the line. And so this is one of the things that people I hear over and over again is the feet feel stronger, more alive. Running feels better. I feel springier. I feel bouncier. My hips open up. My back feels better. It's like all these things because basically what I'm doing is the common thread. I can either start pulling in the ponytail analogy. I can start messing and trying to braid the middle or like pull and try and create some space in the middle of the hair. Or I can just start to create, like go back to the very, very beginning. So the simplest low-hanging fruit you could do is when you get up in the morning, start to move your toes before you even get up on the ground. Do some ankle circles, flex, extend your toes, move your fingers.
It's crazy that like I just never even thought of that.
Yeah.
Like I've never thought about like, oh, well, I'm still laying in bed, just move my. Because a lot of times I'll get up and that first step is like a doozy because some sort of arthritic, pain will hit me.
And what
before
that
I even get out of
arthritis
bed.
is, so this is a great analogy. In this compressive structure I mentioned earlier where we think of the body as like, a roof on top of the column, on top of the ground. So that's actually not how the body works. It's called this tensegrity unit, which is that everything is connected to everything else. And that if you press in on one of these models, everything gets compressed. If you expand, everything expands. And so fascia works like that. So if I pull on one area of the body, so if I straighten my arm and pull this out, for example, I can straighten my leg and then my ankle, if I bend my knee and I move my ankle up and down, that's one thing. If I straighten my leg, my ankle moves up and down. If I stand up and put my head down, my ankle is a little bit different. So everything is pulled and connected. So what you could do is if you're really stiff, let me finish that thought, is that the arthritic component is when bones are on bones. Bones should never be touching one another. They should be suspended in this matrix of fluid and fascia. So if they're touching one another, it means that the fascia has gotten locked down and stiff. And so that one pressure somewhere is pulling everything else in. So the first thing you get up, you wake up in the morning, do some head circles. Actually, I would just start with wrist and finger circles before you even move and become unhorizontal. Then you sit up, you turn, let your feet hang off the ground. Straighten your leg, you do some ankle circles, you point the toes, do some head circles, right? Then you stand up and do some hip circles. So you do the SpongeBob bring it around town, or you stand up. And so at that point, now you've gotten blood flow to the major joints, the elbows, the wrist, the neck, the hips, the feet, the ankles. Because most people, their knees hurt, and their elbows hurt a lot too. But they're not putting load on it first thing. So their knees are what feels stiff. So if I've gotten the feet and the hips to move, the knees as a byproduct start to get the tension that's pulling them in. So the fascia and this connective tissue is either locking everything down, which you feel at the knee, or it's not. And if it's not, then the first thing is your body isn't being compressed into this really awkward, uncomfortable position. And from there, it's like, okay, well, actually I have some freedom of movement. Now I can go start to move a little bit. And so you just start to think a little bit more actively. And so you get the shoulders move a little bit, get the fingers and hands going. You walk to the bathroom and then you're rolling. You can squat down if you need to go to the bathroom, whatever it looks like. That's how you do it. But you start off with this gentle movement. And then once you haven't created, because the other part of this is the narrative of pain we have in our head, which is, you have a story and it's evidenced by scars that your hips aren't healthy in a sense, right? But when you go, I've got bad hips, they're going to hurt. I already assume the pain. So, if someone that's like a dog that's been hit, for example, you go to raise your hand, it flinches. It's like, I was going for the cabinet and I wasn't even looking at you. We have this very strong neural drive where we associate things with that's going to hurt. Therefore, before it even has the chance to assess it as a fresh thing, if we've had pain for months, weeks, years, decades, we're just up, it's going to hurt. And so there's some part of that which you can't measure pain. It's all subjective.
And that goes into I had this conversation with Mark. Every time I've done mushrooms, when I use psychedelics, I can squat down, I can move around, I can move all over the place. And I think it's because it gets rid of your inhibitions. Like it gets rid of that thought pattern that's holding you back, not necessarily fixing you. It's like giving you a clean slate on it's not going to hurt when you squat down. Don't worry about it. And then I can just squat right down. It's really weird what I can do on psychedelics,
Yeah.
Like I'll take mushrooms and just stretch out and stuff. And it's incredible. And so I think as we move forward, and I'm not recommending people go out and do this, but I think it will be part of it will be part of therapy, I think.
I hope so.
You know, in the near future.
So let's we take that 10 stack rating model, which is that everything, something that compresses the unit, compresses everything, something that expands. Now, one of the things that happens on mushrooms and psychedelics is an expansion of consciousness, right? You think of I'm unencumbered, I'm enlightened, I take the things off, I unburden myself. So part of this is I focused on my breath. I realized that like I'm connected. There's a sense of connectedness to the world, and so this Sadhguru talks about this. Which I think is the funniest name ever.
Sadhguru, I like that.
It's a Sadhguru. He's phenomenally intelligent. He's a brilliant guy. But he talks about this idea of like, and again, it's not his idea. I don't know who owns ideas, but I heard it through him. But you know, we think of ourselves as these units that float autonomously through the world, right? And we don't think of like the air around us as part of ourselves. But if nothing changed, but the air was just gone, we'd be all dead in a few minutes, right? And so if the air that flows in and out of you, if you can't live without it, then it is part of you, right? So we become on mushrooms the ego, which is the story of us. We step away from that for just a moment. We get some space there. We shake up the snow globe, as it were. And we're able to perceive that our consciousness, our existence is broader than just our physical vessel, right? So the knowledge is shared, the dialogus between two, like conversation between two, a third thing can be known. So in that moment, we expand. And think about that. If I am expanding one part of the unit, everything else expands. So my body expands. I feel lighter. My muscles become less tense. I'm not holding as much tone. My tissues are able to spread. Literally, I become lighter. And so that's one of those things with our focus, what we attend to contracts or expands us. And so in our day-to-day life, when we get so focused on these things, my pain, my body, that's why I'm so passionate about helping people get out of pain, because you cannot think about it fundamentally, like get out of pain, make money, figure out who you are, use that money to build your future, use that knowledge and money to afford yourself a future, like build it out and then go manifest it. Like that to me is a 5-step plan for success. But fundamentally, none of that happens if you're in pain. If your hips hurt, if your neck hurts, if your back hurts, you throw your back out. The most essential thing, you think about it like if you step on something and your toe hurts, like you're limping around, that's you're reminded every single step. But most fundamentally, most viscerally, you throw your back out. Your life is just on pause. So if people are fragile, if their bodies don't work, if they're in pain, they have absolutely no capacity to think bigger and to be anything more than just, oh, like then they start to label themselves. I've got bad back. I've got bad knees.
Yeah.
I've got bad eyes. And so you notice the language, good, bad, right, wrong. That's very fixed as opposed to I've got a weak back. I've got weak hips. And so that's part of the beauty of why I think it's so valuable to do things. Sports are, I think, an outcome that you can push people towards. But I think from a process metric, weightlifting, strength training, yoga, anything that's a discipline that forces you to use your body, forces you to realize that, like, I don't have bad knees, just weak.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's why I think it's so damaging when you look at, like,